Hi everyone, it's Spencer from Sketchaday.com. Today I'm going to be using Sketchbook Pro to do a quick sketch of a conceptual craft here. Now, Sketchbook Pro 6 is really great when it comes to the dynamic and feel of sketching. If you're starting out sketching digitally, it's always good to have a good foundation on principles of perspective, proportion, and I think even more importantly, line quality and line weight. So as we go through this, typically my process involves doing a rough sketch, which is what I'm doing here. I've outlined some rough perspective, creating kind of a wireframe and a guide for my finished sketch. Now, of course, since I'm sketching digitally, one of the things that I can do is create layers. As you'll see, I've got my layers window open to the right. And as I'm working, specifically in a more complex area, I'll create a new layer and then make my changes there. That way I don't ruin the integrity of the entire drawing when I make a mistake. The other nice thing about sketching digitally is I'm able to undo if I make a mistake. Control Z is my best friend when I'm sketching digitally, as well as zooming in and being able to rotate the canvas as well. So once this outline is done, I'm going to switch gears and start working on some crisper line work. Sketchbook Pro, which I've been using for quite a few years now, has actually gotten really good at mimicking some natural media, as well as having really good built-in brushes for creating crisp line work and line weight. You'll notice that I'm zooming into specific areas to modify or create lines as necessary. And you'll find that the line weight toward the outside of the craft here that I'm sketching is a little bit heavier than the line weights that you'll find on the inside. And this kind of creates a dynamic in the sketch as I go along. Now, typically when I do a drawing, something even complicated or more complex like this craft that I'm drawing, I like to think of it in terms of three phases, if you will: form, divide, and beautify. So I've established the form, in essence, in that first segment of the video where I did that rough sketch. Now I'm dividing that form into its constituent parts, things like flaps or vents or part lines and covers and so on. And that's where I use a lighter line weight to define some of those details as I go. In addition to that, to help me create straighter or more accurate lines, while I'm using the Wacom tablet, I'm hovering my hand over the tablet to essentially train my muscles and tell them, hey, this is where we're going to go, and then I put my stylus to the tablet and I can draw a straighter line that way. Of course, working digitally allows me to do things like change opacity, or using the pressure sensitivity of the stylus, I'm able to lightly rough in some lines and then add line weight and emphasis as I go. Now that these pontoons are complete, I can shift my attention to the main structure on this craft where perhaps the palette would sit. So to do that, I'm actually modifying the sketch from the underlay just a little bit here, but still I've marked in a line to suggest the axis of this pod or capsule, and now I'm connecting the two structures in perspective together. So as a designer, I'm thinking of things in a practical and functional sense, as well as a kind of a creative or imaginative sense as well. Typically, I'm sketching consumer electronics or shoes or toys or things of that nature, and so for me, doing stuff like this is kind of relaxing. It's a chance for me to take a break and let my brain get a little bit of a workout, if you will. So once again, I've defined the form. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and add some detail, divide things up, and beautify. Now, of course, working digitally, I'm able to zoom in, which is great. Sketchbook Pro allows me to quickly do that using the spacebar key. If I press that, then I can zoom in, pan around using the same control, which is really nice, especially if you have a tablet with hotkeys set up. I'm not much of a hotkey person myself, so I find myself using the keyboard quite a bit to control the user interface as I go. So now that I'm done with the pod, I'm going to work a little bit on creating some heavier line work in that area. So I've adjusted my size for my pencil brush that I've been using here, and I'm just going to go along the outside where things overlap and in the general outline of the object itself. And again, this really helps the eye pick up the limits or boundaries of the object that you're sketching. Lines don't really exist in real life. They're simply a representation of light passing the edge of an object, or the limits of where I can see. And so in a two-dimensional sketch, to create some dynamic, if you will, or depth, varying the line weight helps me achieve that. So just zooming in here, I'm just going to continue cleaning up some of this line work. As you can see, just adding that extra line weight really cleans up some of those rougher lines that are in the sketch, and having just some nice fluid strokes. Again, Sketchbook Pro is really great at just giving me some nice fluid strokes. So as you can see here, building a line weight up creates a little bit of a dynamic in the sketch. The lines, or the areas in the sketch that are closest to me, have the heavier line weight applied to them. And as I go further away in perspective, those line weights taper off just a little bit in their weight or emphasis. And this is a sketch, so not all my lines are perfect, not everything is spot on, but everything is grounded in correct principles. Just adding some details here on these little pontoons, some little vents perhaps. And you can kind of see how just by varying my pressure on my pen and opacity of the stroke, I'm able to create an effect to represent a change in surface for where these vents go. Okay, I'm going to break a little bit talking here and just let you watch kind of what I do next. I'm going to be just adding some details and working on lines, some shading, blocking in some areas to show different materials and so on. So I'll rejoin you once we get to a point where I'll start to add some tone and shadow using the airbrush tool. So now I'm at a point where I'm feeling pretty good about the line work and where I've blocked in material changes and so on. So now I've switched to my airbrush tool, which in Sketchbook Pro is really nice if you want to really show the surface changes in an object. For example, here I'm adding shadow cores right in the right places on these round objects to kind of reinforce the fact that yes, these are bulbous in nature, and the shadow of the airbrush just helps it read so much more. And most digital programs will have some kind of airbrush tool, but I find in particular that the airbrush tool in Sketchbook Pro tends to be a little bit subtle in the defaults. You can always go in and change the settings of the brush if you want, but I tend to like the default airbrush quite a bit because I can work really lightly until I get it right and then modify or erase what I don't need. So now I'm just blocking in material changes, for example. I'm not too worried about coloring within the lines. I'm trying to be somewhat careful, but not being too picky, because now I can come in and just use the eraser, the hard eraser tool, and clean up where I've perhaps gone outside the lines quite a bit. So I'm just going to keep using the airbrush here. Again, just bumping up these shadow cores to reinforce the read of the shape. So here on the underside, maybe a little bit more shadow. And so one thing I like to do is kind of squint as I look at my sketch and see if the contrast is really reading, see if that shape is really showing up, and that's how I can tell if I have enough contrast to help show that yes, this is a round object. So you can see I've created a new layer. I've gone back with my solid brush tool here, and I'm even coloring in some of these areas that are airbrushed over. It just really creates a nice little effect. So I'm not going to be using any color in this particular sketch. I'll have another one in the series where I'll be using some color. I just wanted to show the use of the airbrush tool and some of the solid brushes using simple values. So just to finish things up, I'm going to add a couple background elements, some clouds, and finish up a quick shadow just to ground things onto the page. At the very least, I haven't gone into too much detail, but at the very least you should be able to realize how quickly it was for me to just jump in and start sketching. And that's really what I love about Sketchbook Pro, is just how easy it is to jump in. It's a really lightweight and fantastic program. So thanks for watching, and be sure to check out more content on sketchaday.com and become a fan at facebook.com/sketchaday. Thanks.